Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. We do educational videos here, and we have been doing a lot of Bible decodes here over the last, this whole year really, and for the last few months we've been focused on the Roman origins hypothesis for the New Testament, and that is being forwarded by many authors, going all the way back to really all the way back to the 1st century, but in particular in the modern era, starting with the early 17th century, and a lot of authors in the 21st century as well. Joseph Atwill and Henry Davis, Roman Piso, and now we've come to this book from Michael Menescot's called Christianity's Origins as a Flavian Secrecy Cult. And the Flavians were the dynasty of Caesars that ruled the Roman Empire from 69 to 96 AD. That includes Emperor Vespasian and his two sons, Emperors Titus and Domitian. And the theory goes that these three Flavian emperors, or perhaps just the first two of them, wrote the New Testament, or at least wrote parts of the, at least wrote the Gospels. Most authors think they wrote the whole New Testament. Menescot stopped short of that. He's focused on, in particular, the book of Luke, but all of the Gospels. And I would say that the Roman origins hypothesis is interesting to me because of its incredible explanatory power. I think it really explains everything that the basic Christian theory relies upon God to explain. There's a lot of places in the Orthodox understanding of the Bible, of the New Testament, that, well, when there's not a decent answer to something, you can kind of say, well, God did it. Well, it's much more economical from the perspective of Occam's razor, keeping it simple, that the Romans did it. And the Romans were definitely powerful enough to do it, but they had a major motive to do it as well, especially at this time period. The Romans took over in Judea about 63 BC, and under Pompeius, or Pompey, and he was the general anyway, and then the Caesars really started, Julius Caesar and then Augustus, starting in, I think, 28 BC. But the Jews were incredibly difficult to govern for the Romans. The Romans really believed in religious freedom, but they believed, they tried to absorb everybody's religion into theirs. They celebrated hundreds of different gods. Everybody had their own day to celebrate. But they also wanted you to worship Caesar. So they believed in, this polytheism, the more the merrier gods. And the Jews were the exact opposite. They had a monotheistic God who was jealous and zealous. And they had a whole set of rituals that were entwined with the desires of this God. And they had a belief that they were the chosen people. And And so they were very xenophobic. They didn't want to mix with other people. And they didn't want their rituals to be disrupted. They were willing to die instead of having their rituals disrupted. And that happened many times. Many times there were uprisings or revolutions or revolts or outright wars of the Jews fighting against Roman rule. And eventually the Herods came in. The Herods were like the puppet dynasty of kings of the Judea. There were a bunch of different Herods, and but they all were loyal to Rome, or almost all of them. And so this built up over 100 years, culminating in the 66 AD to 73 AD War of the Jews. It's just called the War of the Jews, and that's now from the Old Testament. The Jews were waiting for a Messiah. The Jews there were many prophecies in the Old Testament that were indicating that a Messiah was going to come to help the Jews, a military Messiah. That's who they were waiting for. Somebody to help them overthrow the colonial power in Judea, whether it was the Romans or the Syrian Greeks called the Seleucids, or the Persians or the Assyrians. They were waiting for a Messiah. And there were really three examples of messiahs that rose up in 66 AD and kicked the Herods out of Jerusalem. They were called Simon, John, and Eleazar. These were the Jewish zealots that were, the messiahs that they were waiting for to kick out the Romans. Unfortunately, Emperor Nero called on General Vespasian to go into Jerusalem to quell the revolt. And General Vespasian was there for 3 years. And eventually Nero was assassinated, and 3 other Roman emperors were assassinated. And eventually Vespasian got the call to be the new emperor. He went to Rome, and he appointed his son Titus to be the new general in this war against the Jews. And Titus was there for 3.5 years. So it was a total of 7 years that they fought the Romans in this war. Fought the Jews in this war before they could actually conclusively win. And both Vespasian and his son Titus were wounded in the war. So after the war was over, I think they had I think there was a work in progress already, but they decided to put out a story of a Jewish Messiah who, instead of being like Eleazar, John, and Simon, who's fighting to kick out the Romans, they put out the story of a Jewish Messiah who was a Prince of Peace and who believed in rendering unto Caesar what is Caesar's, to turning the other cheek on oppression, to walking an extra mile with this Roman soldier's pack, to calling the Roman slave owner the greatest faith in all of Israel, and to urge his own God to forgive the Romans, for they know not what they do. But at the very same time, this Jewish Messiah is out there at the Jewish temple, overturning the tables of the Jewish money changers who were getting rid of the Roman money with the graven images on them for the Jewish money so that they could bring it into the temple for the offering, and disrupting the commerce of the Jewish entrepreneurs who are out there selling doves and pigeons for the animal sacrifice ritual of the temple. So Jesus is taking a direct hit on the Jewish rituals while being extremely passive with regard to the Romans. Just like as if the Romans wrote it. But then you can also remember that the Romans had a complete monopoly on Greek, the language of the New Testament. Very few Jews spoke, much less wrote, in Greek. Some did. The very upper crust of the society, the elite. But in Rome, this was a language of everybody. The elite also spoke and wrote in Latin. And the Romans had a total monopoly on censorship. If the Caesar didn't like it, it was not going to be published. And they had a monopoly on publishing. They are the only group in the Roman Empire who had thousands of slaves, scribes, to sit down and spend the whole day copying books and manuscripts. And they had a monopoly on distribution. They were the only entity within the Roman Empire that had a postal system. And so that explains why there are so many copies of the original versions of the Greek New Testament that have been found. But it goes a lot further than that, and the basic method that the Romans used was that they wrote the New Testament, the Gospels, we'll just say the Gospels, and they backdated them by 40 years. They wrote them in the 70s, and they backdated the story to the 30s. Jesus' ministry in Judea was from 30 to 33 AD. At the same time that they wrote the Gospels, they also wrote a history of this war against the Jews. And that book is called War of the Jews. And they wrote that under the pen name of Josephus. Now, according to Josephus's own autobiography, he was a member of the Roman royal family. He was known as Flavius Josephus, of the Flavian dynasty of Caesars. Now, he wasn't, according to his autobiography, he wasn't originally a Caesar, but he was an adopted member of Vespasian's family. He was actually a Jew who was a general in this war, but he surrendered to Vespasian and had the feeling that the Jews are no longer the chosen people, but the Romans are, by God. And so he defected to the Romans. He predicted that Vespasian would one day become emperor. And when Vespasian did become emperor, Vespasian pardoned Josephus, brought him to Rome, put him up in a townhouse at Caesar's palace, and made him one of the court historians and adopted him into his family. So Josephus's War of the Jews was written at the same time as the New Testament, and they are written as parallel works that are intended to be read together. And the parallels between the two are manifold. In particular, there are many different themes. But the most basic theme to explain is that Jesus had a 3-year ministry in Judea. Titus had a 3-year military campaign in Judea from 70 to 73. Jesus was from 30 to 33. War of the Jews describes Titus's military campaign. He goes here, he has a battle. He goes there, he has another adventure. He goes to another place and has another battle. He goes to a fourth place and has another experience. And Jesus does the exact same thing. Jesus goes to the exact same places that Titus goes, in the same order. And the adventures that Titus participates in, Jesus also participates in, except only on a conceptual level. They don't have the exact same experiences, but they have conceptually the same experiences. Like, it's called typology. You can see the typology just in the book of Matthew if you look at the story of Jesus and how it's the exact typology of the story of Moses. There are many, many parallels between the story of Jesus and the story of Moses. The story of Jesus is a type of the story of Moses. In the same way, the story of Jesus is a type of the story of Titus. There are many, many other sets of parallels, and that's what Michael Menescotz does in his book here. That's Menasgotz. He goes into the book of Luke, and he looks for parallels between War of the Jews and the New Testament. He found over 250 parallels just in the book of Luke. And some of them are heavy and have incredible coincidences and incredibly well hidden, detailed, intricate. And you're like marveling at how difficult it must have been to put this together. But then some of the parallels are kind of cheap and could easily be written off as coincidence if there weren't 250 of them. So they kind of run the gamut. Some of them are biting and ridiculing and mocking. A lot of them are. The Romans were mean-spirited. They loved to pun and riddle and code and use pseudonyms and switch languages and use different literary devices. That was entertainment for them, and I'm sure they had a good laugh with this one. And they really are still laughing almost 2,000 years later. So what Menescotz also does is he graphs the parallels onto a chart. So he takes the 250 parallels, he puts the book of Luke on the vertical axis, he puts the War of the Jews on the horizontal axis, and then he looks finds the parallels. He plots a point every place that there's a parallel at the corresponding point. He finds that after he's done, he has formed 5 near-perfect letters in Latin. You can see that on the thumbnail for this video. APTVS. Latin is the language of the Roman royalty, and AP is not sure, but the TVS definitely stands for Titus Vespasian or Vespasianus. They use that imprint on actual coins of the day. So not only did the Romans write the Gospels, but they literally signed their name to them. And so I think that goes way beyond coincidence. 250 parallels just in the book of Luke. Some of them are incredibly strong. Not that many are incredibly strong. Some of them are, well, he goes over all of them, so you can judge for yourself. You can also judge for yourself by getting yourself a copy of Josephus online as a PDF for free and compare it with the book of Luke yourself. I mean, he's just going over it, and I'm going over each one of them. You know, so you don't have to do that if you don't need to, but you don't have to believe me. You can go over this yourself and find the parallels yourself. So we're going over some of the parallels that are in the A, the right-hand side of the A, which is a reverse diagonal line, which means as you go forward in War of the Jews, you're going backward in the book of Luke. Many of these parallels in the A and the P are a lot weaker than the ones in the T and especially the V and the S. Sparking speculation that they might have been written in a later period by a later emperor, possibly by Domitian, possibly by this guy Arius Piso. Domitian went by the Holy Spirit, which is Aegeon Pneuma, which is AP, or Arius Piso, which is also AP. But I don't think it really matters. What really matters is that they signed their names to it, the Romans, in Latin. Okay, this is Jewish War, paragraph 136, first parallel for today. And that's book 1, chapter 20, paragraph 4 of War of the Jews. And it's expanded on by Josephus' later work called The Antiquities of the Jews, which sometimes he brings in a key point from Antiquities of the Jews, or uses a piece of information there that you need to be able to figure out the riddle or the enigma. So Antiquities of the Jews describes Herod's wife, Mary, or Mariamne, refuses to lay with Herod, but procured a love potion and intended to apply the potion to him. And she was imprisoned for this crime. And when she was discovered, she was put on trial, and she tore her hair in distress. That is matched up with Luke 7:37. In the city was a woman who was a sinner, and she brought an alabaster box of ointment, meaning bringing him a special potion that she would apply to him. I guess apply to Jesus in this case. This is Mary Magdalene. And stood at his feet behind him, weeping in distress, and began to wash his feet with tears, and wiped them with her hair, and anointed him. John, you need John 11:2 for the name of this person to be identified as Mary. So the parallel, Mary, a sinner, or somebody who was imprisoned for a crime, a special potion, and her hair. Okay, the next paragraph is Jewish War 139. Caesar bestowed a country on Herod, where he built a white marble temple by the fountains of Jordan on a mountain of immense height, under which a dark cave has a huge and bottomless body of water, which might be the origin of the river Jordan. Meaning, a great body of water acts against the building, but it is founded on a rock that can resist. Matched up with Luke 6:48, he is like a man which built a house and dug deep and laid the foundation on a rock. And when the flood arose, the flood waters could not shake it, for it was founded on a rock. So again, the parallels is that a great body of water acts against the building, but it is founded on a rock that can resist. Not a great parallel, but like I said, some of them are just there to fill in the diagram, just to get a dot. And it's certainly deserving of a dot. So this sequence continues. Again, barring the few I have highlighted, these are still mostly weaker parallels. However, the next one is a rare example of an interesting one in the AP region of the chart. The following parallel is only remarkable if we first observe how Jewish War 616, paragraph 616 evoked the story of Lucifer in the flames, giving his power and casting himself down from the top of the temple, with his companion bearing him up to avoid him dashing himself on a stone. Here, near the beginning of Jewish War, paragraphs 139 to 141 offer a different metaphor for a white heaven and hell below, followed by a comment that this will be told more truthfully later or in a sequel, perhaps alluding to paragraph 616. The key link to this idea of heaven and hell is the implausible description of a white temple on a mountain named Panium, P-A-N-I-U-M, God of the Wild, with a cavern at the bottom having a depth of that no length of cord could reach, an impossibility for a cavern under a mountain, and clearly a metaphor for Hades and its rivers. Indeed, many scholars have already linked the Panium described in paragraph 139 of War of the Jews to the entrance to Hades mentioned in Matthew 16:18. Recall that in the main parallel at paragraph 616, the passage in Luke 4 hid the name the Arius. We went through that several episodes ago. Whilst the passage in Jewish War hid the name the Piso. So it makes sense that we should look out for another hidden message related to Arius, hidden in this additional way that Jewish War mirrors Luke 4. I didn't quite follow all of that, but I think I have a general idea. Flipping the page, I guess we go right into the parallel here. It looks like it's pretty convoluted. Jewish War 139 to 141. And on an immense mountain, Caesar had a temple, a place of worship of white marble, built called Panium, a name derived from Pan, the god of the wild, a white place of God on a mountain. And at the bottom of the mountain, there is a cave containing a horrible precipice descending abruptly to a vast depth containing an immovable body of water so deep that no length of a cord is sufficient to reach the bottom. It's above the hell Hades and its rivers. And as some think, this is the root of the Jordan River. But we will tell the true story of this in the sequel. And indeed, Herod built other temples and filled the country with such temples in Caesar's honor, and built many cities which he called Caesareas. And he built Strato's Tower, which elsewhere is identified as a metaphor for Jesus' cross. He built the tower in white marble. All who sailed for Egypt were obliged to lie in the stormy sea. The wind raised such vast waves that dash upon the rocks. And Jewish War 143 goes on to discuss that within a large, beautiful temple to Caesar was created a colossus, a huge statue of Caesar, not less than that of Jupiter Olympus, which it resembled, equating the emperor with a Roman god. And he named the city Caesarea. Now we're going to Luke 4, 5 through 11. The devil took Jesus up into a high mountain, saying, "If you will worship me, all will be yours." Jesus told Satan, "Get thee behind me," using the Greek word opiso, which, as previously shown, is a hint to the piso, o meaning the. But the word for behind is opiso. "For it is written, in their hands they shall bear you up, lest at any time you dash your foot against a stone." And Luke 4:8 is repeated and elaborated on by Matthew and Mark as follows. Mark 8:27 and Matthew 16:13. When Jesus came into the coast of Caesarea Philippi, so also Panium, his disciples said others thought he was John or Elias, but Peter said he was the Christ, the Son of the living God. Matthew 16:18. Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. And I will give unto thee the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Then charged he his disciples that they should tell no man that he was Jesus the Christ. And skipping a couple of verses, Jesus said, Satan, get thee behind me, for the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels. And this is now in Mark 9. And Jesus took them into a high mountain and was transfigured. His clothes became white as snow. Again, in both cases, we have Jesus or emperor, and in both stories, we have worship up on a high mountain, but specifically in both stories at the coast of Caesarea. And in both stories, there is a descent to a subterranean underground place of mythical or infinite depth, directly connected with the holy house built on this rock. And both passages mention the term Caesarea. Knowing that this mirrors the passage which gave us the Piso and the Arius, we should be on the lookout for another hidden name relating to the Roman royalty, which might involve the word Arius. It is certainly not difficult to find. In Jewish war, Caesar deciding to call his cities Caesareas, and that same term, Caesarea, appears in the gospel story as elaborated on in Mark and Matthew, albeit that in the original Greek it ends with an S, Caesarias. When Jewish war was written, the term Caesar had become accepted as a generic way of referring to the emperor, whichever emperor was the most relevant. So splitting Caesareas into two halves gives us the Caes, C-A-E-S, evoking Caesar or in general emperor, and secondly Arius. If Arius or Arius with two R's is the Latinization of Arios, denoting the god Ares or Mars, then the phrase being hinted to is godly emperor or Emperor Ares. Whilst there is no proof that Ares or Arius is meant to evoke the Roman deity Ares, notice how the passage in Jewish war immediately goes on to discuss the creation of a huge statue of Caesar